So happy to be with the three of you. Thank you for being here. Mr. Byrd, you are the most visible emblem, although you're not necessarily in Texas a lot of the time. You are the most visible emblem of this effort, this Battleground Texas effort to bring the state back to Democratic control, as I said. How's it going? 9 months in. What meaningful progress, measurable progress, can you point to for those 9 months?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having us today, and thanks for all of you for being here so early on a Sunday. So for those of you who know about Battleground Texas, I'll just give a quick background.
Sure.
The goal is to make Texas a competitive state, to make it a battleground state. In order to do that, we believe we need to treat it like a battleground state.
Yeah.
And so over the last 9 months, what we've done is a couple of things. Number one is built a staff, an incredibly talented staff, battleground level staff in this state. Jen Brown, who's our executive director, is leading the effort. She's put together a team of organizers who are starting to crisscross across the state in order to get out there and build the infrastructure that we need to make this a battleground state. So number one, we've been able to attract the kind of talent that we need at the staff level. And 80% of our staffers are from Texas, and some of the best people I've ever worked with. The second thing is we need to build a volunteer base across the state of folks that are willing to do the hard work it takes to win elections. And that's about registering voters, going out and knocking on doors, getting deputized to become a voter registrant. It means going out and talking to folks who are already registered and turning them into habitual voters. Yep. And we've seen great progress on that front. As you know, the laws are difficult in Texas to become a voter registrant. You have to go to your county, you have to get trained, and then you get a card, and you have to bring that card with you. We've trained over 3,000 folks already in just a few months to go out and do that work, and they've started to register voters. They've started to learn what works. One of the other pieces is, we have to make sure that we are building the data and technology infrastructure across the state. If you go to a battleground state like Florida, Ohio, Colorado, where they've been working elections for several cycles and they've been very competitive, the voter file infrastructure, what we know about voters, who they vote for, who's registered, who's not registered, how to talk to them, that infrastructure needs to be put back in place. And
you're talking about, Mr. Byrd, you're talking about the efforts that were deployed similarly on the behalf of the Obama campaign, your experience to identify the people who need to be turned out to vote and then ultimately to turn them out. Yeah, that's it.
I mean, it's not just the Obama campaign. I mean, we're talking about if you're in a battleground state that has been contested, and it's contested every single election cycle, all up and down the ticket. It's not just the presidential level. It's statewide elections where you've had volunteers, and every single cycle you're working, and you leave it. Even if you come up short in some of these states, you're leaving it in a better place for the long term. And that's what we've seen in other states, and that's what we're starting to build here. And we've seen incredible success. We've built a donor base of over 4,000 individuals who are giving to Battleground Texas in order to put that infrastructure in place. So we're excited about the staff we've been able to bring. We're excited about the volunteers that we're engaging. We're excited about the donors that we're engaging. And we're excited about changing the conversation in Texas and nationally about the future and what we can do here.
Now, Senator Van de Putte, it sounds good. And, Mr. Byrd and his team are very energetic, and they mean well, and they're going to work as hard as they can to pull this off. But as you very well know, having been in this world at the ground level for a long time, the numbers for Democrats are challenging. If it were that easy, and he's not suggesting it is easy, but if it were that easy, it would have happened, right?
Well, winning elections is tough, and particularly for Democrats the last decade. But I think that there is a tremendous combination and a set of circumstances which puts us on a much stronger foothold to win some this cycle and more each cycle.
Something different than has been the case in past.
That's correct. I think many people think, well, it's the demographics. It's the growing Latino and minority population. Certainly that will help, but that's not all. Democrats have not had the resources to get out that message, to do the sort of things that Jeremy has been doing with Battleground Texas. I mean, we have been a donor state. We are the ATM for national politics.
Other Democrats come here, take money of good Democrats, and then leave.
And when resources play such a critical part, $1 million can absolutely make a difference in a U.S. Senate race in Alaska. In Texas?
That's about a week of paid media, right?
Exactly. But Democrats are going to have to work for it. They are not only going to have to be organized, but the issues that they stand for are really about the issues of middle-class families and opportunities. And so I don't believe for a word that if we're just going to sit back and wait for the demographics to come, that we're going to be successful. Democrats are going to have to work hard for it. And I think that there's an exciting continuum of the work that's going to be done exciting candidates,
Yeah.
and certainly I think the Republicans are helping us a great deal.
How are the I realize this is going to be a little bit like slow-pitch softball, but how, Senator, are the Republicans helping you?
Thank you. You know, because they have not had a competitive general election.
Right.
Their action has been in that primary, and it is who can go the furthest to the right. And we're seeing that, and we're going to see that in several of our races. And so when they disrespect and disenfranchise women because of the equal pay or because of health care, when they callously make very insensitive and toxic remarks about Latinos and immigration, when they alienate our gay and lesbian community, let me tell you, voters really take notice of that. We saw that this summer. We're going to continue to, and it is going to be a very wonderful thing to have actually a debate and a dialogue. But it's going to take work, and we just are not going to have to sit back and say, well, we're going to wait for the demographics. But the Republicans, I think, are helping us in a great way because they are alienating middle-class families. We're making inroads with suburban women. We're making inroads with small business folks. And now with business leaders, tremendous business leaders who understand that what's happened in the Republican Party is they all come to this, they heed this, the shriek of that like dog whistle Tea Party stuff that's going on. And that isn't helpful for them in a general election when you've got to have the funds and the type of strategies to do water infrastructure, to do road infrastructure, and they're not there.
Mr. Mayor, you talked about these very issues. What I'm hearing Senator Van de Putte say, I heard you say repeatedly on the campaign trail. Right. You were well-funded. You were politically acceptable to many of the same business leaders that Senator Van de Putte is talking about. You were going to be the most competitive candidate for governor in years. Many of the same dog whistles that the senator is talking about were audible at that time, and yet couldn't bring the ball over the line, couldn't even get in the red zone. So what's changed in 4 years? What did you learn then, and how have things changed now so that maybe what the senator is talking about could conceivably happen?
Well, obviously what happened, almost every pollster saw it, was that Perry and the gang of people who, you know, are perennial office holders in the Republican Party at state level converted it into a national election. There was a backlash against the administration. Many independent voters thought that the administration embraced government faster than they thought it would, or had a stereotype of, fulfilled the stereotype that some people had of Democrats. So you saw this backlash against the administration and independent voters wanting to send Democrats a message.
Right.
Well, because of what the senator said, I think you're going to see a lot of those people, too, right now wanting to send the Republican Party a message. There's so many Republicans who tell me, I see them every day on the street in the town I work, that, boy, did they make a mistake in the last election in light of Perry's debate performance, I guess you could say.
The last election being 2010.
Yeah, 2010, the inertia we have in our state on education and transportation, and now the showboating that's going on in D.C. So I think there's what was a bit of an anchor for many sort of mainstream Democrats in Texas, some low favorable ratings and bad view of the national scene. I think right now that's going to be an anchor for the Republican Party.
Let me flip that around, Mayor, and agree with you that a nationalized election can be bad for Democrats at certain points. You seem to think that if the election is nationalized next time, it will be bad for Republicans. Why won't this very conservative state with this very conservative electorate, the numbers would bear out that it is a conservative state, why will they not react to the president this time the way they react to the president last time? Why will they not react to Democrats this time the way they reacted last time?
I agree with you. And I think they will try to nationalize it because they don't have much of a record to run on, really. I mean, they will, and because there is this, the president still is not 60% in the polls. I don't think, all I'm saying is it won't be as potent as it was when we saw and we saw it throughout the nation, not just Texas, where such a backlash. Moreover, I think the conclusion one draws from that is that our candidates for state office should remind voters what state government does and what they should expect of state government. I found on the campaign trail, people on the campaign trail across the political spectrum thought it was ridiculous, unacceptable that we don't do a better job of teaching career education so that people have skills. We dropped vocational education in the grease. Textbooks in junior colleges cost $300 a textbook. That's not right. That's not Texas, and people are stuck in traffic all over the state because the state has not invested in the infrastructure. That's not a Republican issue, a Democratic issue, independent issue. That's a Texas issue.
Do you think voters hear that stuff and think this is a motivation to vote? You know, my colleague Ross Ramsey says all the time, anger is a greater motivator than joy at election time. And the fact is, you'd like to believe that you could marshal people's anger on that stuff, but it can be hard. You know, it can be hard to get people to say, I'm going to change horses because of traffic, or I'm going to change horses because of the cost of textbooks. Blasphemy to talk about substance in a campaign. I know that we want to, but Mr. Byrd, it's not as simple as ticking off the bill of particulars that the mayor's talking about.
Well, there's a couple of things. So when the mayor ran, we lost by 631,000 votes. 631,000 votes. There were a little over 13 million registered voters, and we had less than 5 million turnout.
Right.
So when you talk about the state, there's a bunch of different things we have to do to win. Number one is, those were 13 million registered voters. There are a whole group of other voters who are not even registered right. yet. And those voters who are not registered look and will vote much more like the Democratic Party in Texas than otherwise. So that's one piece, is voter registration.
And I'll come back to that. Go ahead, keep going.
Okay, great. Yeah. We'll come back to that. So that's one piece. The other piece is the folks who aren't turning out to vote. We've got to go out. Our turnout numbers are 51st in the nation in Texas, 51st.
Right, the election in which Mayor White lost, 2010, we were dead last among the 50 states in D.C., about 32, is it 32%?
Yes.
About 32% turnout, dead last.
Dead last.
Right.
So those are two huge pieces of the puzzle. And then the last one is persuasion. It is talking to folks who are voting. And you look at the poll, and you particularly look at where we've been since 2010 with suburban women in Texas. And you've seen the polling on this, Jim's polling. In 2010, suburban women in Texas were identifying with the Republican Party about 50%. Those numbers have dropped every single year since. And the identification with the Democratic Party has gone up. Why? Because of the extremism within the Republican Party. There are fair-minded Republicans and practical independents in the state who do not like what they're seeing with a Republican Party that continues to trend far to the right and is represented by folks like Senator Cruz. So we have to do all three things. We have to register folks who are currently not registered. We have to turn folks out who are registered who aren't turning out to vote. And we've got to do persuasion work. We've got to talk to voters in the suburbs and the rural areas. All three of those things, that's how we get 631,000.
But Mr. Byrd, I hear you, and the numbers certainly would suggest opportunity, upside. But at the same time, we've been hearing for years about getting people who are who are eligible but not registered to register, people who are registered but not voting to vote. Senator Van de Putte, I remember talking to Tony Sanchez about this right before the 2002 governor's race, and he showed me all these maps in his office of counties in which, in his case specifically, the Latino vote, eligible to vote but non-registered, registered but non-voting in previous elections. It was all low-hanging fruit, he said. And if we only got a small percentage of those folks to turn out, there was no way, he told me mathematically, that Rick Perry could get elected. They're called unlikely voters for a reason. People don't just turn out if you close your eyes and squint real hard and hope that it happens. And so, Mr. Byrd, I hear your plans for turnout, and I don't dispute your math, but actually executing upon this is quite a bit harder than thinking you ought to.
Yeah, well, just look at one poll. After the 2012 elections, Hispanics in Colorado, a poll, how many campaigns talked to you face-to-face, came to your door, talked to you on the phone, engaged you in the democratic process? Poll is around 70% of Hispanics in Colorado were reached out to and educated and brought into the political process from an organizer, going to their house, going to their community events, engaging them in the process. That number is in the 2020s in Texas, same poll. Right. There's two problems. One, Republican Party in Texas, with Greg Abbott as the leader on this stuff, has done everything they can to put institutional barriers in place for voting. We have to break those institutional barriers down. The second thing we have to do, though, is we have to go out and run a 254 county program on the ground, doing the hard work it takes to put a registration form in front of every single voter, to talk about the choices, to do that work. We haven't done that to the scale we need to do that. Yeah. We've seen it done in other states. Florida is a massive state. We've seen it done there, where you get turnout numbers in the Hispanic registration community in Florida in 2012 that are in the high 60s, low 70s. We can do that in Texas. We have to put the resources on the ground, and we have to do all the hard work, and it has to be a long-term approach, not just about the next 2 years, but about the long-term future. We can do that. We've done it in other states, and we can do that with good candidates, organizers on the ground, and a lot of money put into it.
Senator Van de Putte, I want to read you a quote from Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst, said yesterday on this stage at the festival, and ask you about what Mr. Byrd is saying. Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst said the following yesterday: "Elections are decided by who turns out, and increasingly we're seeing fewer and fewer people turn out for our elections. So if the Democrats get all of their base turned out and our base is complacent, we could have a problem." This was Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst yesterday talking about the prospect of Texas turning blue. So I think he agrees with Mr. Byrd that it is about turnout, turnout, turnout. But you know, saying you need better turnout is one thing, executing upon it is another, and particularly in the Latino community, where turnout as a percentage of the eligible to vote population has lagged behind other groups historically in Texas.
I think what Dewhurst was saying was, Houston, we have a problem. And certainly Governor Dewhurst, when he's a lieutenant governor. And when he thinks that universal health care is walking into an emergency room, that is a huge disconnect with everyday families. And it is that constant disconnect that we're hearing. So yes, I think we're going to be more competitive, but it's because there is a crescendo of a lot of variables that are coming into play. Better organization, resources. After Thursday, I think a great candidate. And when South Texas doesn't turn out, they are not engaged.
Yeah.
Start tearing up their roads and make them into gravel. What is happening now under this leadership, because we haven't invested in the roads. Start talking to suburban moms who are really upset because their children's 7th grade program that is absolutely wonderful in the arts has been cut off because the legislature cut $4 billion from the schools. And not only that, but the legislative members did that, went back home and bragged. They bragged about how much they cut public schools. You're going to see those populations. And that didn't happen when Tony Sanchez was running. That wasn't a variable when Bill White was running. And we had candidates who were passionate. Tony Sanchez, well-funded. We've had policy wonks. We've had charismatic.
She meant that as a compliment.
Yes.
I do. I take it that way.
In this room, that's a compliment. You're actually, yeah.
Because let's face it, we haven't had leaders that are that understand policy. I mean, they're not policy wonks. But I think that in the future, we will have for the first time a candidate who has all of those components in one, and a motivated base.
And a motivated base. Mr. Mayor, another crucial element here is organization.
Yes.
No Democrat, as I said, has won statewide since 1994. A generation of people in the business of organizing successful campaigns has kind of come and gone. No one really in the business now at a low level has really even seen a winning Democratic campaign. So how do you go back to the days when Democrats were successful and come up with an organization of people who actually know what they're doing? What do you do?
Well, you know, I learned political organization, as Leticia knows, from a guy named Willie Velasquez when I was a teenager. That's how I started out in politics, going door to door, doing voter registration drives and then voter turnout. And you know, I may not have been a veteran when I was 16 years old, but so long as I was willing to work and go door to door and talk to people about where they were, doing it as a volunteer. So you need less veterans and people who take responsibility, who want to be invested in the future of our state.
So experience is not everything. Motivation, energy, all that, that's much more important.
Absolutely.
Right.
And the Army of Volunteers that Jeremy talks about is so important. One thing that's different that Jeremy highlighted in the last election, we raised money, but that money, a fair amount of that money went to fund a voter turnout effort that in other states is funded by party organizations. which for various reasons, and God bless everybody who volunteers their time or is a lay leader of a local party organization, but in so many party organizations, they didn't have the resources that they need, even to give people material when they go door to door.
Right. Mr. Byrd, you talked about the data operation that would be deployed not just during the presidential campaign, but in past campaigns. Somebody referred to that before we got up here as the Obama big data pixie dust. But as long as you sprinkle the Obama big data pixie dust over everything, good things happen. Is that the route to organization in this next election, that you're going to mine the data, identify these people, and that's going to be the basis? It's going to be a new form of organization as opposed to the old school, old style form?
No. Big data is, I think, very important. And it's important for a couple of reasons. One is when you have a volunteer that's giving their time, and they're going out on a Saturday morning and they're going to go knock on doors, what you want to do is put the most efficient and effective list in front of them. Whether you're trying to register voters or persuade voters or do a combination of them, you want to make sure that the list they have and the people they're talking to are going to be the most effective use of their time. But if you just have big data and you just have a great list and you've done modeling and you know who's likely to support you, who's likely to be undecided, who's likely to support your opponent, and you don't have an organization to actually take that and do something with it, it's just big data. So it's got to be the organization to actually do something with it. And that means the organization is the community organization part of it, the volunteers who are going out there and doing the work. And in order to get the kind of organization we need across the state, we have to invest in training. If you ask big businesses what makes you successful, it's that they've invested in training and professional development of their staff and of the people that are engaged in their company. We have to do the same thing in political organization. We have to invest in folks. And the people that we're training all across the state are going to be there for cycle after cycle. They're going to know how to enter the data.
So this is a long-term play.
But you got to do that, investment in folks now. And then the other thing is, when I went across the country on the presidential campaign, every battleground state that I went into, I would talk to folks, ask them where they were from. And every single state, there was organizers from Texas. That's right. They were from all over Texas. And they were in other battleground states learning what it feels like to win. And those folks are back. Those folks are here.
Right.
And we're going to keep bringing more and more of them back.
Right.
And they're going to help bring a new generation that they're going to train. So big data will be one piece of it. The organization will be another. We also have to be smart online. We have to have digital programs that recognize so many people we want to turn out. We're not going to reach them on the phone or at their doors. We have to reach them where they're going, which is online. So we have to have digital sophistication as well.
Senator, this all sounds very expensive to me. What I'm hearing Mr. Byrd talk about, it sounds expensive. It may not be as expensive because technology can make things cheaper. We all know that. But the reality is Democrats are going to need money. Money is a crucial element in all this. And again, over the years, there has not been enormous success in raising money for Democrats. Mr. White, you were funded quite well relative to other Democratic campaigns. Mr. Sanchez obviously was able to write an unlimited check or almost unlimited check for himself. But in both cases, it didn't matter. Greg Abbott right now, if I'm Ross, I think I'm right about this. Greg Abbott has right now more money in the bank than any candidate in Texas history at this point in an election cycle. $25 million that we know of. He will have literally unlimited resources to run this campaign. Anything he needs, he's going to get. Can Democrats truly hope to be competitive now or any time in the future in terms of fundraising?
Democrats are going to be competitive. We know that Democrats invest. They invest nationally. Why? Because they want to invest in a winning team. And I think we're going to have that confluence of candidates, operational strategies to be able to do that.
Where's the money going to come from? In-state or out-of-state?
I think it's a combination of both.
Combination of both?
And it's a terrific combination of both. Look at just what Wendy Davis was able to do with the number of donors that were giving small amounts.
Right.
Compared to General Abbott's campaign contribution, which is the majority of the money, is all folks that give that $100,000. Someone who gives 25 or 50, they're going to put that investment, they're going to come back and vote for that candidate.
Right.
I think we're always going to be, at least the first couple of cycles, at a disadvantage monetarily. We're going to be competitive. But how did the Republicans do it? They did it because they elected John Tower, and then they elected Clements, and then they did that. So I think we're going to have a breakthrough candidate. All
it takes is one.
All it takes is one, and you break it through, you show that you're successful. It's kind of like being in any major league sports. You get to the playoffs once, and they expect you're going to get to the playoffs the next time.
Right.
Democrats are at the playoffs, we're going to be there.
So the psychology is as important as anything else. Mayor White, the Democrats considered you to be a big get when you ran. It is about, in the end, who runs. And for the previous couple of cycles, no disrespect to those candidates, it was, at best, pretty good side dishes, but there were no entrees really running for office. You were the first entree in a while they were able to recruit. But of course, you had a problem, and that is when you looked down, there was nothing but air, right? One person does not make a ticket. So let's assume that Senator Davis is going to run for governor. I'm not going to ask her because she's not going to tell me. I'm going to ask you. Is Senator Van de Putte going to run for lieutenant governor? Are there going to be other candidates on that ballot? Are there going to be other candidates on that ballot? I mean, you've been in a situation where you know what it's like to be the guy who is at the top and you have no cover from below. And so can I mean, all the enthusiasm for Senator Davis notwithstanding, is one person really a ticket? Is one person really a comeback? Or do you need a whole field of fully fleshed out candidates?
Well, for the good of the state, we need people like the senator and others of stature who step up and run for statewide office. These are important offices. You notice, and now it's not going to be like the way that Karl Rove did it, where he selected this person to do this, and this person to do this, and this person to do this on a Republican ticket, so that it could create an image or not threaten another client of his. We're going to do it in our own way. We're going to do it in our own way, where people compete, and it's going to be an open primary. But I think these are important offices for the state of Texas. They're critically important. The office of lieutenant governor is an important office in the state of Texas. We need people who have stature, who have experience, who can work with people on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
And so I haven't talked to the senator about it, but I think this is I would encourage candidates to seek statewide office.
Yeah, well, okay, I will ask her directly. Senator, that was I just gave you like a 1-minute warning to formulate your non-answer when I asked you. What they say at the poker table in Las Vegas is you cannot win if you do not play. You have a competitive Republican primary. They're going to be beating the crap out of each other for the next couple of months. And whoever emerges, it will be through a very hard-fought process, either in the first round or the second round. And it's, it could be the incumbent. It could not be the incumbent. You have a 4-year term. You drew a lot for a 4-year term. It's a free shot. Downside is if you run and you lose, you've spent your time during the campaign beating the stuffing out of the person who's your boss. So you end up on a committee that meets in Siberia twice a year, right? But there are worse things. Are you going to run? Straight away, are you going to run for lieutenant governor?
The worst thing that could happen is they could put me on a basket weaving committee or something. And
yeah.
It's a very personal decision and one that I am frankly looking at very, very carefully.
Not ruling it out, not ruling it in.
No, looking at the analytics, but as you know, my family's had a really tough year.
Right.
We had a great legislative session and a wonderful celebration as President pro tempore as governor for a day. And then tragically, we lost our infant grandson to SIDS. A few weeks later, we lost my dad, who was perfectly healthy in a horrific traffic accident. And then just 2 weeks ago, my mother-in-law. It is very difficult for my family to absorb so much loss and pain and be able to go with a campaign that is going to be brutal.
Yep.
I mean, and that's the difficulty of it. But I'm still looking at the analytics. About half of the family just says this would be wonderful for us, and the other half is just still in so much pain. It will be a family decision, but I am looking at it, and I want different leadership for this state so badly.
Yeah.
And it's not about winning elections. It really isn't. It's the policies that can be changed. If we don't fund significantly a water infrastructure, in 10, 15 years, we're going to be sucking dirt all across this state. If we don't address the major infrastructure, and the leadership that we have had this last decade is about delay, and it's about ignorance, and it's about not understanding that we have serious problems. And to win elections, all they've done is mask them. Well, the bills are coming due. We have got to put that, and it's going to take adults in the room to make those tough, critical decisions. I have 6 children and 6 grandchildren. This state needs the better leadership, not just because of my kids, but everybody's grandkids. And I don't see it, and that's what's going to compel me to throw my hat in if my family is all.
How soon? When will you tell us? When will you tell Texas what you plan to do?
Well, let's wait until after Thursday, when I think we're going to get a great announcement.
Call you Friday?
Call me, baby.
I have your digits. It's okay. I will call you. I will call you Friday. Mr. Byrd, what I said to Mayor White, I'll say to you, one candidate does not make a ticket. So what do you do? How do you persuade people? You know, there are a lot of people who are waiting for an engraved invitation. There are a lot of people who say, I'd run only if I know I can win, or I'll run only if I know I don't have to give up my gig, which is why Senator Van de Putte or a couple of other senators who may be looking at a statewide race are willing to entertain it, in part because they say, well, if I come back, at least I've got a place to land, as opposed to giving up my seat. Many House members may be thinking it's either up or out in that case. How do you persuade people that this is a worthy thing to do, even if it ends badly?
So I think a couple of things. One is, when I first started talking to folks down here earlier in the year, and people would just dismiss 2014 sort of altogether. And one of the things that people said, if you're a donor or a political advisor, and somebody comes to you and asks, should I run statewide? You have to be able to answer them and say, there's an infrastructure to support you. And there are other people that are taking on the courageous step.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing both things happen in Texas, which will then, I think, encourage other folks, to fill out that statewide ticket. So I think that's one
You think something is, because back in March, Mr. Byrd, you said to the Tribune, to Ross, for a story that ran in the Times, you said the following thing to him. Would you tell a friend today to run statewide? You were referring to as a Democrat. Mm-hmm. Would you tell a friend today to run statewide? Maybe not. It's like the old drunk driving thing. Friends don't let friends run Democratic, right? I mean, what you were suggesting was that the environment in Texas, this is back only as recently as March, may not be conducive to being able to tell a friend who sought to run Democratic, this is a good time to do it. So what's changed?
Well, if you look at it now and you look at some of the folks who are considering running, their friends are telling them to run.
But what changed? Was it the filibuster?
Well, it's a couple of things. I mean, one, obviously there's a huge amount of energy in the state since then. Yes. And I think what people saw, both here in Texas and really across the country, was a couple of things. One is that there are incredible local candidates on the Democratic side in Texas, sitting next to one of them, and you're going to hear from another, very soon. And there's many more across the state who are public servants who are doing amazing things. The second thing they saw in that is the activist base across the state, the number of volunteers, the number of people that are willing to do, what it takes to make this state competitive. The energy there is there. But I think there's a couple of things. We have to do both the short term and make sure that we have an environment, the infrastructure, that people can look at their friends and say, you can do this, you should run. And the second thing we have to do is there's a reason that the Texas Rangers go to the playoffs all the time. And there's a reason the St. Louis Cardinals go to the playoffs all the time. They go because they have a farm system that they invest in, and they think long term. And we have to do the same thing here. We have to recruit people not just to run statewide this cycle. We have to recruit people to run for county offices, to run for local offices, so that they can then run for statewide in the next cycle.
It's a ground-up deal.
Yes.
Right, okay. All right, I'm going to suggest that people begin to line up with questions in the audience. I'm also going to ask our team in the back to give me a heads up on the time when we begin to get short on this. But let me just ask one last question of the panel before we take questions, and that is, where are the issues that Democrats have the most opportunity on? Not the issues that you wish you had the most opportunity on, but the polls will show that in Texas, overwhelmingly, voters are at least split or agree to some degree or to a great degree with Republicans on a lot of the big issues that you may want to run on. And so I'm looking for, where is the fertile ground? Where are the issues, 2 or 3 issues on which not you wish they were with you, but you can point to polls or give specific evidence that they are with you, that you think are the basis for a successful campaign, top, middle, or bottom of the ticket. Senator.
I think education is the top of the list. Yeah. The investment in our students. I think it's education. Part of it is healthcare, but there's a huge small business community out there. And what Democrats, I think, are the strongest on are those issues that affect middle-class families, small businesses, your neighbors and neighborhoods, because what we find is that people love their neighborhoods, and they love their neighborhood schools. So I would say those two things, I think we can capitalize a lot on small business, because let's face it, this administration, it's all been about that corporate cronyism and big business and who's through that.
You sound like Deborah Medina.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, I think that there's folks on both sides that are really at a point where they see that only the very few get the advantage.
So this may be an opportunity to actually pick up some people from the other side who've gotten frustrated with that aspect of.
And Evan, I'll tell you, that on your premise, I got to tell you, we did a lot of polling.
Yeah.
And most Texans agree with the positions of the Democrats in the legislature on most issues. And so this idea,
so what's the deal then?
Now, I will tell you that there are a lot of Texans who have disagreements with some issues with the national administration.
Right.
We saw that. The extent of the borrowing, the size of the stimulus that was done, the individual mandate, and I could go down a list where you saw that people had questions about some policies that were being pursued. I'm not saying one thing or another, I'm just telling you what, but on the state of Texas, people tend to agree with the positions that the Democrats take in the state legislature.
All right, but let me ask you, before we take our first question, let me ask you about that. I seem to remember, Mayor, that there was a moment when the president was coming to Texas during the 2010 governor's race, and you suddenly had to be in Anchorage that day. Would you advise Senator Davis to campaign with President Obama or to run screaming in the opposite direction if he offers?
Well, first of all, I mean, maybe I'm just old-fashioned, but I agreed with somebody who was the head of a local county party organization to be in a local parade.
Right.
And
I think it was in Alvarado, right? Am I remembering that right?
And I always kept campaign commitments. I mean, I talked to the president. I told people I talked to the president. It's not so. Anyway,
you'd advise Senator Davis to campaign with the president?
But on this, I think that the important thing to do, and not to put distance from the president, but it is important for the voters of this state to know that they're voting for the governor of our state,
not for the president.
Not for the president.
Right.
And that's and Republicans will try to make it a vote on the president because they don't have a record to run on.
Well, you know, every Republican candidate this year, whoever the Democratic nominee is, they're going to run against the president.
Of course.
It's been ever thus.